Galayaman, ugayang galayaman, dawat mi kan na po kabunyahan, Rosarosan mabendisyonan, Rosanon mamatikan si kaputain, kami pa'y mapiyag si ando-ando, gayam. O tiyampayin kami malasatan, pandemyan sang-sangwan minlosan, Pwede kami pa'y kasiyan na po Diyos kangatuan, gayam. Ulayain kami ang nanusan, ayumin damdanan. Ilinin kami na puwan na idpay damagot yan sila wengan, gayam. Kakailyan awat sinadayuan, kamamit kandi kami nasidinglan, kablawan midi kayulasan, gayam.
Bayang magiliw, pelas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyat ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pa sisingin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa siway at sa langit mong butaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisag ng matawat mo'y tagumpay na natitigil, ang bituing at araw niya kailan pa may manililig. Lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsika, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, mamamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Cradled by majestic mountains, blessed with nature's flowing fountains, blooming flowers and verdant hill is a region of murmuring rills. Cordillera, region of wonder hail, beloved land, your name we shall not fail. Honor and fame to you will strive to bring. Your glory one we shall forever sing. Here dwell freedom-loving people, strong or bond, it's hard to topple. For our freedom we rise and fight, our priceless ancestral birthright. Neath the sky the rains may gather, angry clouds may crazily wander, but the sun shines forever fair as we climb up the golden stairs. Dreams of peace, of oneness and progress, cherished goals our region presses, striving aim to build a brighter dawn for our children to call their own. Cordillera, region of wonder, hail, beloved land, your name we shall not fail. Honor and fame to you we'll strive to bring. Your glory one we shall forever sing.
Good morning to all. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. We are very pleased to be able to welcome those of you who have been with us in our earlier conferences, as well as those who are joining us for the first time. This third International Conference on Cordillera Studies was supposed to be held in July last year, but it had to be postponed because of the pandemic. I would like to thank the paper presenters and speakers for your patience and sustained interest. Several months into the new normal, platforms for a virtual conduct of webinars and conferences have emerged. Models for such virtual events have demonstrated that objectives of international conferences can be achieved, albeit through remote communication. This virtual mode for ICCS3 enables a wide international and local participation despite mobility restrictions at this time. The capacity of the virtual platform to record the conference proceedings also allows the archiving of materials which can be curated and made accessible for us in remote teaching and learning, as well as research and policy discussions, because it's also possible to broadcast the conference through public platforms such as Facebook and YouTube. The University of the Philippines, Baguio is able to include and encourage the engagement of members of the public who would otherwise not be able to join in the traditional face-to-face conduct of this conference. It is therefore a mixed blessing that this conference can be done in this virtual platform, and we are confident that the proceedings will benefit international researchers, faculty members of UP and other state universities, students, policymakers, and the general public. In today's gathering, in the subsequent Mondays of July, we come together to share, learn, and ponder on the ideas that will inform our understanding of sustainable development and our role in the achievement of this great aspiration. We will listen to studies, initiatives, projects, and various actions that are being done by individuals, organizations, and agencies that contribute towards the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals, especially among marginalized sectors like indigenous peoples. A very warm welcome to all. We wish we could have hosted you all here at UP Baguio. I am sure, however, that the gathering in our virtual venue will be lively, hopeful, and inspiring, as the two earlier conferences have been. Thank you and enjoy our conference.
Greetings to everyone, to all of you from around the world. Welcome to the third International Conference on Cordillera Studies. Congratulations and thanks to the Cordillera Studies Center of the University of the Philippines in Baguio for organizing this event. Just a bit of a backgrounder. In 2015, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. At the core of this resolution are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs as we know them, which were an outgrowth of the 8 Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, to reduce extreme poverty by 2015. The 17 new SDGs raise the stakes, so to speak. For the next 15 years, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development aims to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and want, and to heal and secure our planet, and to take bold and transformative steps to shift the world on to a sustainable and resilient path. The agenda makes a lofty pledge that no one will be left behind. For the world's roughly 370 million indigenous peoples, this pledge carries a hefty weight. Indigenous peoples have been left behind in every social, economic, and political indicator. This is the effect of widespread discrimination, geographical and political exclusion, limited infrastructure and capital investment, and of course, decades and centuries of oppression. Indigenous peoples make up approximately 5% of the world's population, but they comprise 15% of those living in extreme poverty. A 2016 World Bank study of poverty trends in 10 countries in Latin America, Asia, and Africa revealed that in each of these countries, indigenous peoples are not only poorer, but their poverty is more severe than the non-indigenous population. Moreover, their poverty rates fall more slowly than national average rates, indicating that their chances of overcoming such poverty are extremely difficult. Aware of the gaps in the MDGs that had rendered them nearly invisible, indigenous peoples actively participated in the global consultation process that crafted the 2030 Agenda. During the 2016 High-Level Political Forum, the Indigenous Peoples Major Group submitted a paper expounding on the theme of ensuring that no one is left behind. This paper, incidentally, was co-developed by the Baguio city-based Tebteba Foundation, which counts among its board of trustees UP Baguio anthropology professor Jessica Carino and UP Baguio history professor and former chancellor Raimundo Rovillos. This paper emphasized that indigenous peoples must not be treated as mere recipients of development, but as active agents and drivers of change who contribute directly to sustainable development. Indigenous peoples nurture the planet's most biologically diverse areas, managing 80% of the Earth's biodiversity while occupying only 22% of the planet's surface. Their traditional knowledge systems, innovations, and practices present a wealth of resources for new healthcare systems, ecosystem management and conservation, agricultural production, and food security. Indigenous peoples are vital partners in the implementation of the SDGs. This is reflected in the 2030 Agenda, which calls for the empowerment of indigenous peoples and their engagement in the implementation of the agenda. In fact, indigenous peoples are referenced explicitly in the SDGs 6 times, such as in SDG 2, Target 3, on doubling the agricultural productivity and incomes of small-scale food producers, in particular, indigenous peoples. And in SDG 4, Target 5, on ensuring equal access to all levels of education and vocational training for indigenous peoples. Many of the SDGs are relevant to the well-being of indigenous peoples. 73 out of the 169 SDG targets are linked to provisions of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. They are also linked to the ILO Convention number 169, or the Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention of 1989. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused widespread human suffering everywhere. It has exposed every inequality that there is, from the lack of basic amenities and healthcare to the lack of information, often delivered in languages and through mediums that are inaccessible to indigenous peoples. However, as the UN itself has said, the pandemic serves as an unprecedented wake-up call, laying bare the failures in our current political, economic, and social systems. The pandemic has made it impossible for us to turn away from the truth that our lives are all interconnected, and that when we leave behind even one, we all pay the price. Now is our chance to recreate our world, to find out where we are, and to reach out to those who could not cope with the run. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, we need to turn the recovery into a real opportunity to do things right for the future. To do this, we can turn to our higher education institutions, which serve as venues where divergent voices can tell their stories, be heard, and be attended to. Conferences such as this one are valuable platforms for enlightened discussions, the presentation of data and research results, and most importantly, the sharing of experiences, struggles, and lessons learned. Through this conference, in particular, we can engage in dialogues with our government partners, in civil society, in international agencies, and in the communities, thereby drawing a more accurate map of where the indigenous peoples are concerning the 17 SDGs. And so I am glad and proud to see UP Baguio, led by Chancellor Corazon Abansi, organizing this third international conference on Cordillera Studies. Although through an online venue that has opened up this event to a broader global audience, UP Baguio leads indigenous studies in Northern Philippines through its Cordillera Studies Center. It is headed by its director, Dr. Ruth Tindaan. The CSC has produced renowned academics and researchers, such as UP Baguio Professor Emeritus of Anthropology, June Prilbret, and UP Baguio Associate Professor of Anthropology, Dr. Annalyn Salvador Amores. Dr. Amores is a University of Oxford alumna, NAST Outstanding Young Scientist, and Metrobank Outstanding Teacher Awardee. Moreover, in September this year, UP Baguio's PhD in Indigenous Studies program will roll out. It is the only program of its kind across the entire UP system. In fact, this program is the first of its kind in Southeast Asia. It is undoubtedly a big step towards inclusiveness in support of sustainable development of our indigenous peoples, particularly in the Cordillera region. I sincerely hope that we can work together to envision a new world rising from the ashes of the pandemic during this 4-day conference. A world that deeply respects all human life and our very own planet. A world that provides enough to enable all to live a safe, decent, and fulfilled life. A world that allows all peoples and cultures the social, cultural, and political space to nurture themselves, their needs and grievances, and their aspirations for unique beauty and wisdom. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a productive and engaging time. Thank you and keep safe.
Idaga nagtaudan, idaga nayanakan, uon iti pagtiyagan, kagat lingkat iunan. Nagramutan ti puli, nagpakatan ti dili, nagadalan ti ugali, pagawidan ti umili. Pagtakeran ti balay, pagmulaan ti pagay, paginadaan ti natay, itigay tuy abantay. Kaapuan inataywan, saan tayo abay-bayan, saan maipalusan, idagat at maawan. Kas pangarigan kepada, ibang agaw tinaga, ay pagtitinulungan, bantayan sa lapiban. Tinaga nagtakutan, tinaga kayanakan, uun iti pagpiyagan, darakendag tipunan. Di naman ang lupain, dito ako ay nagising, dito ako ay nabuhay, at dito rin mamamatay.
The National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, the duly mandated government office to protect the interests of indigenous peoples in the country, fully support the University of the Philippines activities through the Cordillera Study Center, 3rd International Virtual Conference on Cordillera Studies with the theme Indigenous Peoples and Sustainable Development Goals. UP's effort for international and continuing engagement for governance and development bodies. Your partner, the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, is very supportive of this activity, considering that it fully supports the 4 bundles of rights to it. Number 1, ancestral domain and ancestral lands. We know that your office or the university is very supportive on this. Dapat respetuhin ang territory occupied by the indigenous peoples. Number 2, social governance and empowerment. We know that the University of the Philippines is very supportive to the requests of the indigenous peoples for the recognition of our self-governance and self-determination. This is clearly provided for in Section 13 of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. Likewise, Section 14 of the IPRA clearly provides the support to autonomous region. We know that the University of the Philippines is very supportive for the establishment of autonomous region in the Cordillera. Number 3, social justice and human rights. We know that your program through the Cordillera Studies Center is very supportive of our equal protection and non-discrimination of the indigenous cultural communities and indigenous peoples. Lastly, cultural integrity. We are promoting unity in diversity. Here in the Cordillera, gusto po natin ipaglaban ang establishment of the Cordillera Autonomous Region para tayo po ay pantay-pantay sa harap o mata ng batas. Likewise, our fight for sustainable development. Sana po ang kayamanan ng Cordillera ay suportahan ng gobyerno. Ang karapat-dapat na maibigay sa mga katutubo ay dapat ibigay ng gobyerno at ibigay ng mga investors sa ating mga katutubo dito sa Cordillera. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we fully support your program through the Cordillera Studies Center for this international virtual conference. Salamat po at mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Betonan ko si Anufan, iserak ni Kubilan. Inaspul ko si Kapitan, sinakpat to'y kampilan. Ospianyos, ospianyos. Bangon, bangon ka ina, nagmanganop ni ulsa. Agayo en syahanag, tep-en uli ak jen syagus. Hinaspul ko si Kapitan, sinakpat to'y kampilan. Ospianyos, ospianyos. Sedak kan bulan, musilwi inak panaksyan. Sumipan nanufan ni sahel jen mahabas. Hinaspul ko si Kapitan, sinakpat to'y kampilan. Ospianyos, ospianyos. Sedak kan silwi inakan aksyan. Bato-bato ikatinan, bulu-bulu ipesyanan. Hinaspul ko si Kapitan, sinakpat to'y kampilan. Ospianyos, ospianyos. Inupos to'y kampilan, inbet-betod avadak. Man bejakbak isahalan, binte ko sumut inak. Inaspul ko si kapitan, sinakpat to'y kampilan. Os Pianos, Os Pianos. Bangon, bangon ka, ina.
Kinakailangan tayo ang henerasyon na magwawakas sa matinding kahirapan.
Tayo
ang henerasyon
na pinakapursigidong
Labanan
ang kawalan ng hustisya at hindi pagkakapantay-pantay.
at ang henerasyon na siyang susugpo sa climate change.
At ito ang gagawin natin.
Ang Sustainable Development Goals.
15 taong plano para sa ating lahat.
Sa bawat sulok ng mundo,
wala tayong iiwanan.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundong walang sinuman ang dumaranas.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo kung saan
Walang nagugutom at gumigising sa umagang nagtatanong,
may kakainin ba yun?
mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo kung saan walang taong namamatay
Sa sakit na may lunas.
At kung saan ang
tamang pangangalaga
Ng kalusugan ay panghabang buhay.
ang karapatan ng lahat.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo kung saan lahat ay nakakapag-aral
At nabibigyan ng sapat na kaalaman
At kasanayan,
para sa isang masaganang buhay.
mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo kung saan lahat ng kababaihan
At lahat ng batang babae
ay may patas na oportunidad upang umunlad.
maging matibay at ligtas.
hindi tayo magtatagumpay.
Kung kalahati ng mundo
ay naiiwanan.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo kung saan
Lahat ay mayroong malinis na tubig
at maayos na palikuran.
sa bahay,
at sa trabaho.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundong
Sapat na enerhiya para sa lahat. Init, ilaw at
kuryente na hindi sumisira sa mundo.
Sa isang mundong umuunlad
ang mga ekonomiya.
at ang kayamanang tinatamasa.
Ay siya rin magbibigay
Ng disenteng trabaho para sa lahat.
Sa isang mundo kung saan ang ating mga industriya
infrastruktura
at pinakamahusay na inobasyon
hindi lamang ginagamit upang magpayaman.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundong walang diskriminasyon at labis na di pagkakapantay-pantay.
Sa loob ng ating bansa,
Sa pagitan ng mga bansa.
mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo kung saan
ang lungsod at komunidad ay ligtas.
Naunlad at sumusuporta sa mga naninirahan dito.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo kung saan ibinabalik natin
Sa inang kalikasan.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundong desididong sumpuin.
ng banta ng climate change.
mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo
Kung saan pinangangalagaan natin ang ating mga karagatan.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo kung saan pinangangalagaan natin ang buhay sa kalupaan.
Mga kasubatan, mga hayop.
ang kabuuan ng ating daigdig.
Mamumuhay tayo sa isang mundo kung saan may kapayapaan sa bansa.
Kung saan ang lahat ng pamahalaan ay may pananagutan.
At isang mundo
kung saan mamamayani ang hustisya at bawat isa ay pantay sa harap ng batas.
At tayo ay dapat mamuhay sa isang mundo kung saan ang lahat ng bansa
at ang kanilang mga mamamayan
Ay magtutulungan upang isakatuparan ang Sustainable Development Goals.
sa lahat ng mga tao at sa lahat ng sulok ng mundo.
Ito ang United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Tayo na't kumilos
Sabay-sabay natin isakatuparan ito.
Para sa atin,
ito ang United Nations Sustainable Development
There's a place in your heart, and I know that it is love. And this place could be much brighter than tomorrow. And if you really try, you'll find there's no need to cry. In this place, you'll feel there's no hurt or sorrow. There are ways to get there if you care enough for the living. Make a little space, make a better place. Heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me. If you want to know why, there's a love that cannot lie. Love is strong, it only cares for joyful giving. If we try, we shall see. In this bliss we cannot feel fear or dread. We stop existing and start living. Then it feels it always. Love's enough for us growing. Make a better world, make a better world. Heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me. And the dream we were conceived in will reveal a joyful face. And the world we once believed in will shine again in grace. Then why do we keep strangling life on this earth, crucified soul? Though it's plain to see this world is heavenly, because glow, heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me. Heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me. Make a better place, make a better place, make a better place, make a better place. Heal the world we live in, save it for our children. Heal the world we live in, save it for our children. Make a better place, make a better place, make a better place, make a better place.
With the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals by United Nations member states in 2015, these global goals now inform national and international plans of action for achieving equitable prosperity and well-being in and among nations. To achieve the SDGs, the UN promotes a multi-stakeholder approach which recognizes the role of every sector in the interconnected tasks that must be undertaken. Among the stakeholders, the academe is identified to hold a significant role, not only in disseminating knowledge about the SDGs through its institutions, but also in mobilizing knowledge communities or networks of expertise and practice to find solutions for specific development challenges. The influence of the SDG framework in the overall direction and management of academic institutions is indicated by how it is now being used not only as a roadmap for action, but also an indicator of performance. To gauge how academic institutions are responding to their role as a significant sector in the attainment of the SDGs, university ranking platforms such as the Times Higher Education University Impact Rankings incorporate the SDGs into their criteria. Universities are now being assessed on how well they advance the cause of sustainable development. By organizing this conference, which features the SDGs as central theme, the Cordillera Studies Center of UP Baguio performs its role as a research center, mobilizing knowledge communities to seek solutions for sustainable development concerns. In doing so, the CSC increases the social impact of the University of the Philippines in terms of helping the country achieve the SDGs. And consequently, it earns further qualifications for UP for social impact, not only in the rankings, but also in real social consequence. In addition to the substantial and instrumental goals which this project can achieve for the university, it also responds to the call for quality assurance. As the third installment of an international conference organized by the CSC, this project is both a result of assessment of the earlier initiatives and an attempt to advance what had been achieved. The first international conference on Cordillera Studies held on February 2008 addressed the general theme, Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities in Transition. This conference covered significant transformations in the Cordillera, where contemporary forces of change such as globalization, electronic technology, and migration were profoundly altering the lives of indigenous peoples. On the other hand, the second ICCS, which was held on July 2017, had a general theme, Indigenous Studies in the Philippines, Issues and Prospects. The conference allowed participants to discuss and identify directions on how indigenous studies as a distinct field of inquiry can be established and consolidated in the Philippines. It can be noted that the two earlier conferences were successful in accounting for the expanse of knowledge production on the Cordillera and in facilitating the scholarly discussion of recent developments, perspectives, approaches, and debates in the study of the Cordillera region and other indigenous communities. Building on the network of enthusiasm generated by the earlier conferences, the third ICCS takes a step further by directing the discourse on Cordillera Studies to move more toward social engagement, in addition to knowledge production and scholarly exchange. The earlier conferences have disseminated a prolific body of work on Cordillera Studies and have explored avenues for pursuing Cordillera Studies as an academic enterprise. Having such foundation, the ICCS3 focuses to focus energies on one central, urgent social concern, that of achieving sustainable development among indigenous communities, especially in the context of current health crisis and other challenges such as food security, environmental protection, natural resource management, and overall well-being of these communities. With Indigenous Studies and concerns on Indigenous people's welfare as the niche of UP Baguio, this conference takes on a purposeful outlook in producing concrete ideas and workable solutions which can be utilized into effective governance and social mobilization by attentive officials and citizens. I would like to echo the aim of the SDGs, leave no one behind. This is a challenge not just for UP Baguio, but for all of us who are attending this conference. As we participate in the sessions in all Mondays of July, let us keep in mind that we are doing this not just for ourselves, but for others as well, especially those who are left behind. We strive to achieve sustainable development for all, including indigenous peoples. As a university mandated to serve the Filipino people, UP encourages you to collaborate with us in achieving the SDGs and in fostering inclusive development through fruitful conversations and exchanges of innovative ideas, such as what we intend to do in this conference. With confidence in what we can achieve together, and in this conference and in the forthcoming collaboration activities that will and should be done afterwards, I now declare the virtual Third International Conference on Cordillera Studies officially open.
a farming community in northern Luzon, Annalyn and Tony moved to the city some time ago to find a better life for their family. Years later, they still dream of a decent job for themselves, a home they can afford, a healthy family, and being able to keep their 3 children in school.
People say that the Philippines is getting richer, and I do see more cars on the road, huge houses behind high fences, and large shopping malls. But this is a kind of life that we can only dream of.
Annalyn's family is among the over 3 million poor households in the Philippines that have not benefited from the country's economic growth. Less than 1% of the population owns much of the country's wealth. Many are left behind. In 2015, the Philippines joined the member states of the United Nations in adopting Agenda 2030, including the 17 Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs, a 15-year plan to end poverty and hunger, ensure education and decent work for all, bring about income and gender equality, provide universal health coverage, protect the environment, and achieve lasting peace. The 17 SDGs work together to ensure that the fruits of development are enjoyed by all and that no one is left behind. Since 2015, the government and the UN have been continuously working together to harmonize plans and be responsive to the needs of the people. Our collective goal is to end poverty and help achieve peace and prosperity for all. Due to time and resource constraints in meeting all the 17 goals by 2030, the government and the UN in the Philippines have agreed to focus on the goals that present the greatest challenges, but which also have the potential for the most impact. While poverty was significantly reduced in 2018, there are still more than 17.6 million Filipinos living on less than $40 a month. We need to help lift more people out of poverty at a much faster rate. Half of the country's 108 million population in 2019 are below 25 years of age. Further economic growth of the country depends on whether these young people become healthier and more educated. However, the Philippines has one of the highest numbers of stunted children in the world. 1 in 3 children are short for their age. Teenage pregnancy is among the highest in the region. The number of women who die from pregnancy-related causes is too high, a trend that is caused by poor nutrition and lack of access to quality services. Decent jobs are hard to come by. The low-paying jobs available to the poor do not pay enough to live on, to provide food and education. Rapid urbanization and economic growth on top of climate change is not sustainable and is causing serious damage to the environment. Lastly, peace remains fragile, especially in conflict-affected areas such as the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. There can be no development without peace. The Philippines and the United Nations have agreed to work together to respond to these development challenges. The Partnership Framework for Sustainable Development, which was signed in November 2018, commits the Philippines and the United Nations to ensure a prosperous future for everyone in the country. The UN will use its global competence and experience working with the government to serve the people, to ensure that everyone in our society is healthy, food secure, and well-nourished. The vulnerable and underserved will be given particular attention, including women, children, people with disabilities, indigenous people, and those living in geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas. The partnership seeks to ensure that decent jobs are made available and pay fairly to provide for the needs of families. Urbanization and economic growth must be supported by environmental protection. The partnership will strengthen the Philippines' ability to respond to climate change, especially in the context of frequent natural disasters. Recent calamities and environmental challenges have shown that urbanization and economic growth cannot be achieved and sustained at the expense of the environment. Climate action, building resilience, and protecting the environment are essential to sustainable and inclusive economic growth to counter the worst effects of climate change. Just as importantly, the partnership framework emphasizes that sustainable and inclusive economic growth is impossible without just and lasting peace. Under the partnership framework, the Philippines and the United Nations will catalyze peace and respect for diversity through dialogue and conflict resolution in communities. By creating decent jobs and resilient livelihoods, poverty and underdevelopment, the root causes of most conflicts, will be addressed. People will also be empowered to lead and participate in governance processes. By 2023, the Philippines and the UN expect to pave the way for Annalyn, her family, and millions of others seeking a better life and livelihood. This will help accelerate their journey. This will also put the Philippines on a steady footing as it strides towards 2030, the finish line for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030.
The road that lies ahead of us is long. I do not know what awaits, but I am certain that my family and I, and everyone like us, are not alone in aspiring and working for the future we want, the future we need.
The Partnership Framework for Sustainable Development, the roadmap to development that leaves no one behind.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome everyone to the very first plenary session of the Third International Conference on Cordillera Studies. Our first plenary speaker will walk us through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and emphasize or highlight the role or the part of indigenous peoples and other marginalized groups in the attainment of such goals. Our first plenary speaker is Professor Maria Assunta Cuyegkeng, PhD. Dr. Assunta Cuyegkeng is a professor at the Department of Leadership and Strategy of the John Gokong Wei School of Management. She is the Executive Director of the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture. Until the end of May, she was the director of the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability. She obtained her bachelor's and master's degrees in chemistry from Ateneo de Manila University and her doctoral degree in chemistry from the University of Regensburg in Germany. Her current research and teaching interests are in the fields of leadership and sustainability management. Dear friends and participants to the Third International Conference on Cordillera Studies, let us all please welcome Professor Maria Assunta Cuyegkeng.
Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to be with all of you in this conference this morning. I'd like to begin by looking at a few figures from the sustainability reports of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. For the past 3 years, we can see how the different countries are performing relative to the SDGs. And for the Philippines, you see that we are ranked here 97 out of 162 in 2019. And there are no dramatic changes as we slip from 97 to 99 in 2020, and then to 103 in 2021. You must be familiar with the SDGs by now. There are, of course, 17 SDGs. And among the 17 SDGs, goals number 2 and 4 mention explicitly indigenous peoples. And they have specific targets under these two goals. However, I think it is also important to look at the other SDGs, particularly in the Philippine setting, for indigenous peoples. For example, good health and well-being. That's goal number 3. Goal number 8, which is decent work and economic growth. Goal number 10, which is reduced inequalities. And goal number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. These are also very, very important for local communities and indigenous peoples. Now, let us look at the performance. If you look at the colors here, red means there are major challenges, and orange means there are significant challenges. And you'll see, therefore, that for the Philippines in 2019, we are still in that very critical area of reds and oranges. 2020 showed a bit of improvement. You see that many reds have become oranges and yellows. And yellows mean that they still remain to be challenges, but they have improved. They're not major challenges anymore. And in 2021, you will see that we have slipped back once more. Most of them are in red, maybe due to the pandemic, and so you will see that there is a lot of major challenges now. It's a real concern because achieving the SDGs really indicate how close we are to getting an acceptable quality of life for our people. The SDGs remind us of the imperatives toward a safe, just, and sustainable space for all. They remind us of the urgency to make right our social foundation and to ensure that we do not break the ecological ceiling with our human activities. So you will see in this donut economy model of Kate Raworth, she emphasizes the need to eradicate poverty to bring everyone above the social foundation, which is the inner circle, and to reduce global resource use so that we can go back within the planetary boundaries. Now let us look at the elements of the social foundation. According to Raworth, the priorities in setting the social foundation can be clustered to first enable people to be well. So here you see that it has to do with food, water, health, and housing, which can also be associated with SDGs 2, 3, and 6. The elements of social foundation should also enable people to be productive in terms of income and work, education, energy, and these are associated with SDGs 4, 7, 8, and 9. They should also enable, the conditions should also enable people to be empowered, which has to do with their political voice, social equity, gender equality, network, and peace and justice, and they are related to SDGs 5, 10, and 16. And I think we can also say that at the foundation of all this is SDG 1, which is no poverty. We would like to think that if we eradicate poverty, we will enable people to be well, productive, and empowered. But as we know, there are major challenges in building this social foundation. Okay, for example, especially for indigenous peoples, big projects of government and big businesses have consequences. While there is that intention of providing services for the bigger population or providing employment and profit for companies, large dams and mining activities have led to forced displacement of indigenous peoples and families, not to mention the destruction of ecosystems that eventually affect a community's wellness. Climate change have also brought with it vector-borne diseases such as malaria or dengue, while threatening environmental sustainability. There are challenges in enabling people to be productive. For example, the UN reports that new technologies to increase food production, such as improved seeds, chemical pesticides, fertilizers, they will increase food production, but they can lead to the destruction of sustaining ecosystems. They can lead to environmental degradation. Furthermore, extreme weather that has accompanied climate change has threatened livelihood. There are also times when challenges come from within the community. I remember that sometimes the lack of access to resources and opportunities encourage younger generations of these local communities to have different priorities. When we were doing research on social enterprises, a couple of social entrepreneurs were concerned that younger generations did not want to take up the crafts, the traditional crafts of the tribe or of the community, such as weaving and agriculture, because they earned very little for so much work. So they preferred to go to the city to be in tourism or in some other lucrative career. We heard the same thing from a farmer on the rice terraces when we visited Batad some 16 years ago. He said his children didn't want to continue tending rice fields because they saw better opportunities in the city. Perhaps more importantly, this happens when they do not feel empowered, when they are not given a proper voice so that they know they belong to a safe and just space, like everyone else, that they too have a future, caring for their culture and heritage. Let us now look at the ecological ceiling, the other side of the boundary. And this is about the planet. The planetary boundaries were identified in 2009 by the Stockholm Resilience Center. They refer to 9 processes that regulate the stability and resilience of the Earth system, within which humanity can continue to develop and thrive for generations to come, and which otherwise increases the risk of generating large-scale, abrupt, or irreversible environmental changes. Now, in the model of the donut economy, these planetary boundaries provide the ecological ceiling, which should guide our use of resources, and these are highlighted in SDGs 13, 14, and 15. So, why should these guide our use of resources? Well, mainly because these concerns are a result of human activities. For example, our need to provide energy in our activities means the burning of fossil fuel, which in turn produces carbon dioxide and other emissions. And these lead to climate change, ocean acidification, and air pollution. Our desire to provide food for everyone lead us to more efficient systems, which also means the use of fertilizers that lead to nitrogen and phosphorus loading. Sometimes they lead to land conversion because we convert them to plantations. That leads to biodiversity loss. And this is what has happened, for example, in the palm oil plantations in Indonesia. Water is a very big issue as well, because we need water, which lead to freshwater withdrawals. But these are important resources for everyone in the planet, and sometimes we have a challenge in providing fresh water to everyone. Housing. This is an important basic need, but if we don't have enough land, this can lead to land conversion and biodiversity loss. Our other material needs, such as cars, air conditioning, refrigeration, and other consumer goods, require aerosols and refrigerants, most of which have led to ozone layer depletion, if you will remember, prior to 1992 when we had the Montreal Protocol. So these activities, when properly modified, could lead to the achievement of SDGs 11 and 12, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and Responsible Consumption and Production. Furthermore, we can learn from traditional wisdom of peoples who have a deep connection with their natural environment. No? Unfortunately, listening to this wisdom has been a real challenge. Often people do not like to listen because of their biases or because of intentions that are very focused on economic or political gain. These, in turn, have very little consideration for social, cultural, environmental, and spiritual concerns of communities who have taken care of the place for a very, very long time. In the document Laudato Si', Pope Francis reminds us of the so-called technocratic paradigm. He says, nuclear energy, biotech, information technology, our knowledge of our DNA, and many other abilities have given those with the knowledge, and especially the economic resources to use them, they've given them an impressive dominance over the whole of humanity and the entire world. There will always be economic and political forces at play, but as we all fight for our future as a planet, we need to listen and respect the voices of those who are most affected by the things we do in a particular area. Because that place is not just property, even if persons or institutions have titles to it or own it. These spaces are part of an ecosystem which is shared with the rest of creation. We need to listen because it is also the voice of traditional wisdom. Smead, who wrote an article called "What Conservation Efforts Can Learn from Indigenous Communities," said that Indigenous people's deep relationship with nature and to show that there is a slower rate of biodiversity loss in the areas which they care for. Because they have a long history with their land, they understand the potential uses, the values of hundreds of species. They view their land in a holistic way, managing different habitats to complement each other. They also have a deeper understanding of their natural ecosystems and their dynamics, so that they're able to make better informed decisions. They are able to respond more quickly because they're closer to the ground. And so when there are threats or changes, they're able to respond to them more quickly. In this article, your representative, Georgie Carino, says, "We have always been saying that if you really look at it, Indigenous peoples manage a very large area, or they manage very large areas of biodiversity. But to have governments accept that and to make it one of the major findings of the report that she is referring to, that is quite significant." This is important. You see, the bond of Indigenous peoples and local communities with the environment, this makes them natural stewards. And we can draw lessons from them. We can give them the support that they need because they are in the best position to protect biodiversity and to monitor these ecosystems. So, how can we achieve that safe, just, and sustainable space? Achieving a state where we have met critical thresholds to be within that space between social foundation and ecological ceiling. This needs a delicate balance that can only be achieved when people talk and agree. Why? People need to need to talk and agree because everyone needs access to fresh water. But we need to ensure that fresh water withdrawals do not dry up water resources or that they are distributed equitably. People need to have sufficient food, but how do we protect the ecosystem from nitrogen and phosphorus loading or from biodiversity loss? How do we protect rainforests and grasslands from land conversion while addressing the need for housing and agricultural land? Furthermore, people need to talk and agree at a local level because these goals need to reflect the real concerns and contributions of a given community. The community knows its situation better. Given the right space, community members can articulate and develop appropriate solutions. Partners, related players can share insights after listening. I remember in one of our projects for our centers in the university, facilitators got the school community of an elementary school together. They consisted of teachers, principals, and administrators, but they also included parents and barangay partners. They embarked on a strategic planning with our university simply providing support and maybe in some cases connections, guidance. But the main ideas were from the stakeholders. They needed a school building, and so they made a plan. They indicated their contributions as well. Then they brought all these plans to the city government and lobbied for support, which they eventually got because the local officials were so impressed with their efforts and ideas. The safe space will differ from one community to another, from one region to another, from one culture to another. It is also important to give indigenous peoples and local communities the space for autonomy and self-determination. And therefore, it is important that when we talk of SDGs, we're also localizing those SDGs. Localizing SDGs, I read one document, and it can mean the process of taking into account subnational contexts in the achievement of the 2030 agenda. So when you look at just that perspective, it always is from the perspective of local government, of regional government, of national government. Unfortunately, some governments often try to craft solutions without even talking to the people who will be affected by the policies. And we have seen too often that sometimes we bring solutions for the wrong problems, thus rendering the solution useless. I remember a social entrepreneur friend who said that they wanted to help micro-entrepreneurs keep track of their finances. So what they decided was, okay, let's give them computers so that they could be more efficient in their filing, in their finances, they can use spreadsheets. Unfortunately, the beneficiaries did not see the need for it, even after some training. The computers they discovered were just used for games and other stuff, or in some cases not even used at all. So he said he learned a very important lesson, to listen first and not assume that they have the right solutions. So for me, localizing is not just about work for governance institutions, but it is work for all who wish to empower communities and groups to first identify and analyze which SDGs are their priorities, because maybe what you think is a priority is not their priority. It's important to craft contextualized solutions according to local environments. and develop enabling structures in the ecosystem that by ecosystem here, I mean not just the natural ecosystem, but the multi-dimensional ecosystem, which involves society, culture, politics, and so on. Through genuine dialogue, active listening, and two-way communication, the real stakeholders can have their voice. So they can ask, what are the community's concerns related to SDGs? How can the community best address these SDGs in their context? And it's very important to ask those questions because there are 17 SDGs, 169 targets, 232 unique indicators. No? That's quite a lot. It's really a lot. So the community needs to identify and analyze their priority SDGs, targets, and indicators. Which SDGs should they focus on? Which are needed in strengthening the social foundation? Which are the ones that can help them stay within their planetary boundaries? As I mentioned earlier, the UN explicitly mentions indigenous peoples in goals 2 and 4. And there are targets in 2.3, as you see here, and 4.5. But we can also see specific indicators that refer to tenure rights to land, income, access to education. The question is, which ones are actually the concern of a community? Perhaps their land has already been protected, but there is no access to income. Perhaps there is inequality in accessing developmental funds for the community. So what are those SDGs, those targets, those indicators that are relevant for this particular community? It is also possible that the SDGs are so interconnected that they need to address them at the same time. No? For example, how can communities focus on climate action, life below water, life on land, if they are not well, if they are not productive, if they are not empowered? Thus, it is important to see those interconnections. We cannot assume that they will be the stewards of creation, they will be the stewards of their environment, but then they don't have access to income. They are not provided with good education. No? So these are things we have to see. We have to see the interconnection between the different SDGs. The focus on particular SDGs can lead to the community's crafting of contextualized solutions. And when they do this, it is important because it will come from their perspective. The solutions will come from their perspective. They can draw on their traditional wisdom because they understand the environment in a particular way. They understand their local ecosystems and the dynamics more closely because they are there, they are living it. And it is also important that they articulate the interrelationships to look into other possible consequences. I mention this because systems thinking is a very important aspect of understanding contextualized solutions. It is important, for example, to understand the big picture. You see in this complex diagram that we use to understand food systems for consumption and for responsible consumption and production, you need, if you want to address, let's say, food security, the amount of table food that gets to people, it's not just a matter of making sure that they can buy things from the supermarket, no? Because many things come into play, and often these have feedback mechanisms so that they lead to unintended consequences. For example, raising the level of food production, okay, can actually lead to the overuse of fertilizers, and that eventually lead to surface runoff and pollution. Or it could lead to a lot of agricultural waste that, if you think about it, agricultural waste produces methane, which is a more potent greenhouse gas that leads to global warming and eventually goes back to a lower production, lower harvest. In the case of water use, providing access to clean water for a growing population could mean a threat to local communities whose lives have depended on their access to natural resources, such as in the cases of the Chico River Dam project a long time ago and now the Kaliwa Dam project. As you see, all these subsystems have complex relationships, and it's an interrelationship with economy and governance, with social-political paradigms, with human well-being, and with the state of the ecosystem, the environment. Finally, the community also needs to develop enabling structures in a multi-dimensional ecosystem. As I said, not just the natural environment, but it consists of the social, cultural, economic, political dimensions, as well as other partners and networks, players within that ecosystem. Even when plans start to take off, these enabling ecosystems do not usually come automatically. There is a need to identify champions who will keep the efforts going. There is a need to develop needed support structures, such as those who will be worrying about funding, about monitoring, about improving systems. The group also needs to continue engaging each other in dialogue because trust, good dynamics, shared learning, these all keep the group motivated. Let me end with a summary of the strategy to achieve these SDGs. The strategy is to localize and to empower indigenous peoples, local communities. First, SDGs remind us of the need to create a safe, just, and a sustainable space for all. And we are guided by meeting social foundation and going within the planetary boundaries or our ecological ceiling. However, SDGs are abstract goals unless they are brought to the level of the needs of the communities themselves. To achieve this, the groups themselves must be empowered in the process of identifying and analyzing priority SDGs for their community, crafting their own solutions, drawing from their traditional wisdom and understanding of their ecosystem, and developing an enabling ecosystem which will support the entire process. So I hope that, I know you probably know more than I do when it comes to local communities, but I hope that these are some ideas that will allow us to all work toward a shared vision of inclusive and sustainable development where everyone can enjoy a safe, just, and sustainable space. Thank you all, and once again, good morning to everyone. Good morning.
We would like to thank Professor Maria Assunta Cuyegkeng for the presentation. Professor Cuyegkeng walked us through how different groups and communities and nation states are trying to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And she emphasized the need for all of us, because we need to work together to achieve these SDGs, to listen to one another, especially to the stakeholders. And we need to listen because we need to find out what the priorities of people are. And she said one way to do this is to listen, particularly to indigenous peoples who seem to be doing a good job about or on taking care of their respective environments. She closed the presentation by emphasizing that to attain the Sustainable Development Goals, we need two things. We need to localize and we need to empower. So we are now ready for your questions. We have the chat box for your questions. Professor Cuyegkeng is joining us live to answer your questions. While we wait for your questions, For other questions to come in, we have two questions already from the participants here at the Cordillera Study Center building at UP Baguio. The first question is, you talked about localizing the SDGs. Please share your experiences working with local communities or local government units in trying to make such localization possible or happen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Fong. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I was trying to let me just turn on my video. I can't turn on my camera because it says that the host has stopped it. So please, if you can please allow me, I think it would be better if we see each other. But anyway, let me answer that. Yeah, we in the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability for the past 2 years, we had a program we called it ABG for SDGs. What is ABG for SDGs? It's academe, business, and government collaboration for the promotion of SDGs. So what we tried to do was we put together a manual that would help the different sectors work together and determine what they can do together in terms of the SDG. So we hosted workshops, and in that workshop, we would invite people from local government, people from the academe, and people, let's say, from business. When we say business, these are the micro entrepreneurs, the smaller entrepreneurs, MSMEs of that place. And we tried to get them together to talk about what they can do together to help their particular community. We did this in several areas together with the partners that we have, the member institutions of a partnership which is called SDSN Philippines, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines. So, for example, Mapua University went to Romblon and Marinduque. They gathered together the governance people, the academe, and some business people there. They talked about what they could focus on for particular areas. For example, the congressman was listening, and so he said, I will push this for policy for these particular areas. Our partners from Ateneo de Davao, they work together with the people from Bukidnon, and they were looking at the tribes there, and they were trying to understand how they could also work together toward this. From our setting in Ateneo de Manila University, what we did was to look at the barangay, which included both. It's a mixed community. We had an urban poor community there, or several urban poor communities actually, and also a rather rich middle class community. So they tried to talk together, and what came out there was that they wanted to focus on health concerns. And they said when they focus on these health concerns, maybe the School of Medicine from Ateneo de Manila and the Barangay Health Center, they can work together on these health concerns. So that's what we mean by really localizing it and trying to get people who know the place, who know what they can contribute and what the people need in order to get initiatives, the partnerships going, because partnerships are really very important in attaining sustainable development goals. So that's just one example. And for example, what we tried to do after we saw that this could be helpful is we tried to convert the workshop into a manual, and we're actually sharing this manual so that any academic community can be the hub of these kinds of collaborations for the different local communities. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, very interesting. But there's a related question.
Yes.
Are these initiatives or efforts also part of your being chair of the Leadership Council of Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines?
That was, yeah, because at that time when we were doing it, I was the chair of the Leadership Council. I have finished my term, And since I am not the director of the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, I've passed it on to the next director, Dr. Gatanco Gonzalez. But we still work together and I still help them. And what's important is that it's not really based on personalities, it's really based on the institutions coming together and trying to understand what will work best for the community.
Yes, there's also a related question in our chat box. You mentioned LGUs and working with them. Is it mandatory for LGUs to comply?
No, well, this is an open invitation. Actually, there's nothing mandatory here because this is, I mean, we're not a formal institution trying to get what basically SDSN does is it creates the network. So the network becomes an enabling ecosystem structure, no? Because they know each other, it's easier to be in touch with each other. The initial workshop provides the starting point for them to connect with each other. So we invite the LGUs, we invite whoever would like to come. We invite people who could be representatives of the people themselves. No, so it's really trying to hear the voices and what do you call this? The idea here is the academe provides the venue for it because normally they will not be talking to each other so easily, no? Maybe it's easier for government and the community itself, but getting people with the resources like the MSMEs, how can they help? We want to bring them together and to start the conversation. So we do not say this is the direction you should do. We have a structure that we follow because there are 17 SDGs. So we formed 5 clusters of those SDGs, and they focus on a particular cluster they would like to work on.
Great. Okay. We have a question from Roy Hapasi in our Q&A.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Cordillera in your presentation, but his question has something to do with and prioritizing SDGs. His question is, within the Cordillera, what are the top 3 SDGs that the community or government are focusing on? And what's the current status or progress of these focused or prioritized SDGs? Do you have information?
No, I'm sorry. The work that we did not include the Cordilleras, but I think UP Baguio is in a better position. Your faculty would be in a better position to answer the current state of where they are. I think, in a sense, because of the presence of your center, I think there are more advances, and I think the awareness of the communities themselves are very high in that area. So I will not pretend I know more. So I think I will leave that to the experts in UP Baguio and the other academics in that community.
Okay, we can table that question for the UP Baguio scholars who will do presentations during the conference to take on the question. I'd like to ask these 2 questions together from CD Habito and Rosalie Calpito about integrating SDGs in the curriculum or in teaching our students.
Yes. We have tried to do that. For example, it's for the tertiary level, it's a little bit it depends a lot on the teacher, no, or on the curriculum that you have in our university. We actually have specific courses that focus on the idea of sustainable development, and of course there's a lot of discussion of the SDGs together with it. What we have also been trying to do is to bring it down to the level of basic education. In fact, right now we are finishing up a project where we are creating games featuring the SDGs for middle school children, so that it's easier for them to understand the context and how it applies even to them or to their community. So I think incorporating SDGs in the curriculum will depend a lot on how creative the teachers are. My worry is this: we cannot keep adding new courses. We cannot keep adding based on the the new trends that come up, or let's say SDGs are very important. But what I usually say is this: when you talk of SDGs, or in general, when you talk about sustainable development should not be a course. It should not be an extra course. It should be a mindset. It should be a mindset that each faculty takes when teaching their particular courses. When you're teaching, for example, a business, when you're teaching communication, can you show the students that you come from that sustainable development perspective, so that when you are teaching them to look at priorities or make decisions, that you are thinking, are we giving basic human rights, are we addressing basic social foundations, as I mentioned, no? The social foundation. But at the same time, when we are promoting, for example, when you're teaching economics and you're doing traditional economics, can you also can you shift that paradigm and think about, can we do our economics in a different way? Can we think of not just the benefit, the economic benefit, the profit, but we can also look at, um, can we improve on GDP while thinking of our performance as a country, where we can have our planetary boundaries, where we do not burn too much fossil fuel and contribute to global warming. So for me, sustainable development is actually more of a mindset. It is, maybe it will help to have maybe an introductory course on it, but I think in the long term it should be a mindset that each faculty member and each student eventually will take, because it has to go down to the level of lifestyle, which I think, for example, would be very natural for indigenous communities, because they're so bonded with the environment. But for people like me who grew up in an urban setting, it takes a little bit more effort to realize that uh, you don't need a car all the time. You don't need to be burning fossil fuel, and you don't need to use up as much energy as you do. You don't need to use water to clean driveways. This is for me very, very I get bothered by it, because there are so many people who need water who don't have access to fresh water, and some people, simply because they can pay for it, they do something. And sustainable development is about having that mindset that even if you can afford it, if you know that it is not good for your community, if it is not good for your planet, it is part of your social responsibility.
Yes, and speaking of lifestyles, mindsets, and habits, we have this question from an anonymous participant. She says, we always talk about sustainability, but based on experience, there's a Filipino habit that as time goes by, we tend to lose focus on the goal or get easily distracted and lose steam. Do we have real success stories which really have been sustained in spite of changing times, policies, and even funding partners?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's what I mean by converting it to mindset. If it is a project, when the project ends, then people forget about it. No? But if it is something that becomes a habit, that becomes an attitude, that becomes a mindset. If our education focuses on developing those, then it might it I cannot say it will be 100% sure that they will continue on, but perhaps even our students will continue that kind of lifestyle. I'll give you an example. In 2008, I was then the vice president of our college, and we started a project on sustainability. And at that time, I mean, the level of awareness of sustainable development is really low, no? And I remember then I was so bothered because in the campus there are so many single-use plastics. Usong-uso yung ano ba to, yung iced tea in this disposable cups, no? And they were all over the place. And so I couldn't do it because I couldn't just do something without consulting everyone. But at a certain point, after consulting people and telling them we need to do something about our environment, etc., we actually did something to convince them. First, we did a waste, what do you call this, a waste audit. No, we looked at our garbage cans and we analyzed the percentages of how much kitchen waste, how much organic waste do we have, how much paper, how much plastic, etc. We quantified that and we showed people the results. And then based on this, we started waste segregation. Okay. And then they saw that we 67% of our waste was plastic. So eventually what I said was we will have to cut down on the single-use plastics. And what we did was we banned them on campus. So so faculty and students were saying, what will we do for takeout? No? So we said, okay, there will be a transition time. No? During the transition, we will allow the concessionaires to finish off all their plastic cups that they had already bought, but we are going to transition only to reusables. You can only use reusables in the cafeterias. You can only uh, use reusables even for takeout. So what do you have to do? You have to bring your own baonan. You have to bring your own container, your own tumbler. If you forget it, then for a minimal fee, you can rent it out from the cafeteria. Okay. So we some of our concessionaires helped out by saying, okay, if you bring your own baonan, you'll have this kind of a discount. Okay. So people started to rally together. And I remember initially in 2008, the faculty were so angry with me. It's so inconvenient. Why do we have to bring baonan, etc., etc.? After about 3 years, it was a habit. No one was complaining anymore. And everyone expected that even the new students would learn, this is how it happens in this university. So they bring their own baonan or they rent it out and so on. So I'm not saying that it will always happen that way, but you have to have an effort. You have to make an effort, and that's where champions are important. Remember the last part of the enabling structures. You have to have champions to keep it, to keep the awareness alive. You need people talking together so that the idea does not get forgotten. Our students were very good. They continue to help us in raising that awareness.
So it's possible to change bad habits. Yeah.
If people, it's a combination of getting them aware why they're what. If we did it by just banning it and not explaining why, I think people will just be very negative about it. People will just rebel. But because they know it, they know that there is something deeper. And what for me was very mind opening was that I realized that the students were actually more conscious about it than our faculty. They were more ready as millennials. They were more ready to embrace this efforts on sustainability. So that for me was very, very helpful.
Yeah, great. So let's combine these three questions from Maris Kabato, from Zenaida Bawanan, and another anonymous participant. These three questions have to do with the indigenous peoples contributing data for localized indicators, and then indigenous peoples being lured by commercialization so that they're converting or selling their ancestral forest lands to farms, resorts, or other commercial establishments. And then the participation of indigenous peoples in the monitoring of initiatives towards the attainment of SDGs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very complex problem actually. Part of the reason why people are lured to convert is because they don't have enough for themselves. That's why I'm saying it's also important to realize that people need the income. And if it takes so much effort to grow rice, for example, and not to be able to sell it because the middlemen are earning more than they are, so what's the point, no? So they end up looking for you can also stop these kinds of mindsets, you know. They see that in a certain generation, maybe younger people see that, oh, it's easier to earn money if I'm working in an office rather than tilling the soil, no? uh, that's very understandable. So you have to, I think what has to be done is it comes from two ends. You have to make you have to develop a certain love for it, for the craft, for the soil, for the environment, but people also need to get the proper compensation. So for example, I was talking about the social entrepreneurs who gave that feedback. One particular social entrepreneur, they help farmers develop organic farming, you know, and produce organic products. Some of them are actually there, I think, in the Benguet area, and they sell it to this social enterprise helps them market it to the biggest supermarkets who stands before and Save More, the bigger supermarkets in Metro Manila, for example. And so one of the social entrepreneurs felt that they were not doing enough. So he put up an academy to help these younger generations of farmers develop a love for the soil and for the tilling and for uh, showing that there is something good in it, that they can earn well from it, because only if they really also have a good livelihood and improve their quality of life will they see that, well, this is worth doing. This is better than, you know, leaving my family and going to the city. In that story, in the introduction of Anna and her family going to the city, and no and then finding out that, you know, we don't have it seems attractive, but we can't seem to move up the way we thought we would, no? And it's the same thing, you know. Sometimes people think, oh, when we go to the United States, we'll have a better life. If we go to Australia, we'll have a better life, etc. Maybe, but then it all depends on what are you leaving? What are you leaving behind? What is really your priority? So we have to make it worthwhile for people to stay where they are. And that can only happen if it works well in several directions, that they actually benefit from it, but also in the process help them develop their love for 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 the place. I know some people who have become environmentalists because at an early stage they already developed a love for the environment. And it's the same, no? If you love your place, it's very hard. I mean, you have such a beautiful nature there, you know. Many of us want to be there all the time. So, but it has to, for people to stay there and do all the hard work, it it has to mean something for them as well. It has to improve also their quality of life.
The conversation is getting more interesting and we're having more questions. So let's combine these questions from Mia Almabatagan from the DNR Cordillera and from Karin Kudyasi Pangsoy and from an anonymous attendee. This has to do with the economic growth being still gross national product biased and mostly standards dictated by the national government. So this may go against localization efforts. And then still speaking of government, is there a particular government agency that is mandated to monitor the implementation and attainment of localization efforts towards achievement of SDGs?
NEDA is really the agency that monitors the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, and I think in the SDG tracking, I don't know if PSA also contributes to the data, no? But what I've found with NEDA is that they have regional offices. And I was so pleasantly surprised when I saw that the regional offices are very active and they're very closely attached to their regions, no? So of course it will differ from place to place, but I think with that consciousness in among the regional offices of NEDA, I think they will be a very good partner. They listen a lot and they understand how to deal with the national targets of the Philippines. So it might be a good entry point if you're able to create a conversation with the regional office. Usually, if you have a good regional director, I am not familiar with the Cordillera, but uh, I have been very, very pleasantly surprised with the level of competence and concern that I have seen from many of the NEDA people in the regional offices. What was the other part? I forgot the other parts of the question. Did I answer that, Dr. Fong?
Yes, the first two questions have something to do with the national government dictating the standards of achievement, such as gross national product.
Yeah. So that's why I said since maybe by working it out with the NEDA regional office, they might be able to meet that while at the same time understanding the local the local concerns. Actually, well, if you do it right, any effort, even preserve while preserving heritage, whether it is improving productivity, improving, for example, the supply chain, that will help farmers there move it to the areas where they will earn more, and cutting out, let's say, the more well, the middlemen who may not be helping too much, no? If there's a way of doing that, that contributes to GDP. I mean, they don't have to be mutually exclusive targets, you know. If the localization is done properly, it could actually contribute to the GDP, no? But as I mentioned, the economists would be in a better position to help determine how to do that best. But I think um, I think if we start with the right perspective of understanding where the people are at and knowing how they can do it, uh, it could work. You know, my main concern really is that I've seen so many that, you know, let's say in Mindanao, they want to change this, they want to do this in Marawi, but they have not talked to the people on the ground. They make so many grandiose plans, which often are there are corruption, you know, loopholes there, but they don't ask the people. Sometimes what they need are simple things, and it takes champions really to understand that from local communities.
Yeah, so the importance of listening to the local people. The next question comes from our YouTube viewers, from Kev Duepet. Can you elaborate more on how there have been improvements during 2020 in the area of SDGs, when it was the time our community was at its lowest and was still in the process of adaptation?
Well, I think if you look at the report I showed you, we had no improvements from 2020 because if you look at the 2021, we are now in the red. No, we're in major challenges because, for example, even school was really very challenging. Uh, uh, People anywhere, not just in the Cordilleras, but all over all over the world, actually. We've been challenged with livelihood concerns, with health concerns, especially. So I don't think we really have had any improvements during the 2020. It will take time before we shift, you know. But I think we need to adapt, as Kev was saying here. Uh, there's a lot of adaptation. I've seen that with the MSMEs. They adapted so fast. They tried to earn money using what, social media, connecting so that they could cook for people. People became very, very creative, no? And so that process of adaptation is still, it's still ongoing. I think businesses are trying to understand how they can achieve things in the new normal. In education, we still are doing that. We've been forced to do online, but people are slowly seeing the advantages. Of course, there are disadvantages, but we're not yet quite there that we have finally solved the problem. But I think we're all moving in that direction. I think the pandemic has challenged all of us to look for creative solutions, to look for uh, to see what we can do with the existing things that we see around us. In entrepreneurship, there are two approaches to entrepreneurship. No, one is you can have a nice business plan, and then you can, you look for the things that you need and carry out that business plan. Or you can look at what is available and then decide what you can do with what is available, making it develop more organically. I think we are in that stage. We are in that stage when we need, whether we're in business or not, we need to put up an entrepreneurial mindset, which means that we need to be creative. We need to see what's available, put things together, but we also need to take risks. Of course, informed risks, and see, okay, this is not yet done. Maybe we can try it out and see how this will help us. So we're still experimenting, I think, at this point, and even the government is still experimenting. Perhaps what is important is that we need to sift. What we need to realize now is we need to sift fake news from real, truths, because even in terms of our health, even in terms of education, these are needed, because when we need to make decisions about what we want to do for specific, areas of our lives, even for determining who will be our future leaders in the community, in our region, in our country, these are all very important decisions that will actually tell us, or help us understand if we're going to actually achieve these SDGs, make improvements, or stay where we are.
Yes. The next question is from Willie Alangi of UP Baguio. If you can see this, it seems that SDG 16 does not contain any indicators directly pertaining to respect for human rights or cases of human rights violations. What current indicator for SDG 16 covers this? Or do you think we need a clear indicator on the state of human rights to be included? The current rank of the Philippines from the SDG website with respect to SDG 16 is neither increasing nor decreasing, but stagnating, which is surprising considering the increasing human rights violations in the country, especially against the LUMAD. I think the other questions are also related in the sense of looking for indicators. Yeah.
I am at this point, I have not really studied all the indicators of all the all the 232, but I think in terms of human rights, I'm not too familiar with the targets, as you were saying, but I think there are enough documents about human rights. I think it by itself has a body of indicators. No, that's why you have all. There are several documents that really focus on human rights. I am not an expert in it, so I will not pretend to say something about it. But perhaps they can serve as the starting points. I do not know how they keep track of the performance of a country in terms of human rights violations and how it reflects on the what do you call this, on the tracker. But I think it could be a question that we could also throw to the NEDA, because they really are responsible not just for the economic, but looking at the ambition of the country and what SDGs have to be accomplished. I think those are things that that could be thrown back even as a challenge, because especially now we know that you know it's a cabinet position, so it's very hard to to go against what the current administration says. But uh, you know um, some people really are very professional, those who are there for as career officials can actually help us expose the real data on on human rights or even the other SDGs. Uh, I myself I'm I, I'm I'm confused with how they rate the SDGs like you. The I think in 2021 it showed that we were green already for climate action. I don't think so, but for some reason it was already green. No? So I'm like you. I'm also confused with how they track and what kind of data they look at.
The next question is from F14RB Aviva. What is the best way to sustain SDGs vision for a utopian-like world despite high and extensive presence of neoliberal policies on the whole social structure? The perhaps still related to GNP, dollar-based.
Can you repeat the first part again? I didn't quite get the first part.
Yeah, what is the best way to sustain SDGs vision for a utopian-like world despite high and extensive presence of neoliberal policies on the whole social structure?
Oh, that's actually why I proposed the localization, because I do not believe in the utopian. I don't really believe that there is a one size fits all solution so that everyone will be happy at a certain point. I think that's too idealistic for me. No, I've been in this. I've been looking, observing how we work on our policies, etc. And yeah, I'm very realistic about things. But my experience actually is, if we are able to do it on a local level, my mindset is, okay, the national government has its targets, but I think we work on our own. I mean, I may sound very skeptical, but this is what I've seen working. When people work together for their own communities, it works for them, and it helps improve the well-being of that community, and eventually it meets the targets of the national, the national standards. But it has to begin the at that level, when people are doing things for themselves as well. That's why my strategy is the strategy I'm suggesting is to localize, because that's how things have worked for the Philippines. The sad state of the Philippines, that every time there is a new administration, all policies change because the administration wants to put their mark on it. They want to erase what the previous administration did, etc., etc. It's a sad state. But if if um if we're doing it from a localized perspective, if you're doing it because it works for your community, you do not need that kind of national policy. It will work for you because you believe in it. And people will invest in it because it's good for them. um Often, for example, at the beginning you heard about stunting. uh how much nutrition programs have we really seen coming from government? And there are certain local governments who know that, and what they've done is to partner with people who can work with them. For example, I mentioned the feeding program of our university. We have a feeding program where we feed something like 14,000-15,000 pre-pandemic, in various areas in Metro Manila, up to Valenzuela, no, Bulacan. But that was really a very, very private effort, partnered with with the local government who knew the value of it. But how do you make that into a national program? Actually, that's the role of of certain agencies in government, but they're not doing it. Uh, I don't know why. I don't really know. I have not studied that part. But what I've seen is what works, and I'd rather focus on what works than criticize what is not working. So I think it's time to really just start acting, and we sometimes we overanalyze things and criticize too much. I think we have to get out of that mindset, saying that, oh, this agency is responsible for that. Yes, maybe they are, but we too are responsible for ourselves. So I've started to think that way, that let's stop blaming people. Let's do what we can and show them that we can do better.
Yes. The other questions have to do with the seriousness of the national government to attain the SDGs. Do you have measures or indicators of the Philippine government seriousness?
It's very difficult to answer that. I don't know what their intentions are. I will not try to answer for them. Uh, we'll keep it at that.
Yes, certainly. Yes. We would like to acknowledge the questions from Roy Hapasi. Annalyn Salvador has something to do with the IPRA, but you did not mention the IPRA unless you want to comment. The Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act and its role perhaps in attaining the sustainability goals.
I think you know better than I do about IPRA, so I also will pass on that one.
Yeah, okay, it's from Annalyn Salvador. You mentioned the Kaliwa Dam. Are you familiar of any assistance being given to the indigenous community?
Not at this point. I know that the Dumagats have been, that there are certain measures, no, being done, helping out the Dumagats about what could be, protesting, of course, the Kaliwa Dam project. But I really don't know, because I think, I don't know at what level the contract has already been given to. It's a very, very difficult situation, and it's a very complex one, because you see, that's why I talked about systems thinking briefly, because many of these problems cannot be solved in a linear way. You cannot what do you call this? You cannot say, okay, this is the cause. So Metro Manila does not have enough drinking water because the population of Metro Manila has grown, and Angat, Ipo, the system, the original system is not enough anymore. So they want to build this Kaliwa Dam to supplement the supply. So of course there's a need to you have to give water to all of these people, but it's not a simple problem that well, they need water, so where can we get it? It's not that. It's a complex problem, because first, the resources are not enough, because sometimes we have, because of climate change, no, sometimes you have torrential rains and you see that some of these dams are overflowing, but on the other hand, during the dry season, you see the level not being enough to give Metro Manila its water source. Okay, at the same time, it's also cultural. People in Metro Manila are so used to having their water delivered, and through their faucets, and sometimes they forget the value, and there's a lot of wastage. So there's also a cultural problem, how you see water. I talked about people cleaning their driveways with fresh water, even at the height of the dry season. uh, I see people watering their gardens to keep it lush at the time when people need drinking water. I cannot understand that, you know. There's no more sense of community in that sense, no. People have taken a very different cultural perspective. That's why I say that uh, an indigenous community, perhaps there is a better insight into that because you see it as a whole. In Metro Manila, for example, and I don't know if that's true in Baguio, people have become anonymous. You know, I can use this water because I need it, and I don't know who else needs it because I don't know the other Juan, no, or Juana. uh, i- People have become so anonymous so that they think their access to resources is their entitlement. They don't see it as a shared resource, which is what local communities usually do. In a barrio, in an indigenous community, you see that you share that resource. You share a well, yung balon in the old places, even in the non-indigenous peoples, no? You have a shared water source. You have a shared source of maybe bamboo or whatever, you know. But when in urban centers, things have become so anonymized. People do not know they just see what they need. They do not see that what they do has an impact on their neighbor, or that it can come back to them eventually. So these are mindsets that have to be changed. And you can only do that by making people more aware. Whether they adjust to it is a different story.
Yeah. So yes, we would like to acknowledge the questions and comments by Fidel Manuel, Mina Franco from Mariana Marcos State University, and CD Habito. I believe the comments and questions have already been directly or indirectly responded to by Professor Cuyegkeng. Finally, we have a comment from Madam Edna Tabanda, one of the women leaders here in the Cordillera. She says, the regional and local governments are already reviewing their PPPs to include the SDGs in their development plans. Local governments actually are implementing already those included in the 17 MDGs. However, it's in the implementation that is where the weakness lies. These are in compliance with national laws such as the Solid Waste Law, international and international laws on indigenous peoples, climate change, human rights, local ordinances, etc. There is a need for strengthening policies and implementation and capacitating LGUs. It's from Madam Edna Tabanda. It's a comment.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I believe those are all the questions we have. Unless somebody else will try to send one more question, but I think we've had a very fruitful presentation and conversations with the questions and comments from our participants. We would like to acknowledge our 179 participants from all over wherever you are, wherever you are now. So we will end the session now, and we will end it by doing our virtual presentation of token to our first plenary speaker, Professor Maria Assunta Cuyegkeng. So may I read, please, this virtual certificate of appreciation from the Third International Conference on Cordillera Studies. The certificate of appreciation is presented to Professor Maria Assunta Cuyegkeng, PhD, for imparting her knowledge and experience as plenary speaker during the Third International Conference on Cordillera Studies held on 5, 12, 19, and 26 July 2021 at Zoom, via Zoom. Given this 5th day of July 2021, and this appreciation is signed by UP Baguio Chancellor Corazon L. Abansi and the Director of the Cordillera Studies Center, Ruth M. Pindaan. So Ma'am Assunta, please accept our virtual thank you and gratitude.
And thank you for having me here. It's been a good learning experience for me as
Yes.
well, and I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. So that concludes the first plenary session of the Third International Conference on Cordillera Studies. We after lunch, and we hope you all have a good lunch. Please go to your links for the parallel sessions at 1 o'clock. So the parallel session 1 will begin at 1 o'clock after lunch, and parallel session 2 will begin at 2:30. So to all our participants, please look at your kits, your virtual kits, and look for the links that will direct you to your specific parallel sessions. We will also resend the Zoom links and conference kits to registered participants and paper presenters. We would like to acknowledge our 179 participants and some 500 people watching on YouTube. So thank you, everyone. See you in the different parallel sessions and in the plenary sessions every Monday of July, starting this Monday. So please look forward to those plenary sessions, and we have more interesting plenary speakers. Thank you so much. I really truly hope you have a good lunch. Thank you.